Welcome back, 365 Sports. Max Olson of The Athletic joins us now. Rhett Lashley, SMU head coach at 4 o'clock. And Max, what you been working on? Anything exciting in the world of college football that The Athletic is uncovering?
Any meetings coming up here we got to tune in for?
Yeah, about 1 in 30 minutes.
Moly.
Holy cow.
Guys, I mean, honestly, we've been talking about it for 12 months. Yeah. I mean, you've been interviewing people about this for 12 months. I've been interviewing people about this for 12 months. So, frankly, there's like a little bit of just sigh of relief to actually have a tangible development at this point, you know?
Oh, yeah. I said in this last break, I've said it like 15 times in the last 24 hours. Like, I'm just so glad to have something like meaty and real to talk about that's not just like, hey, what could, should, would, and like, hey, no, hey, this is actually happening. It's just, it is a relief in some ways, and now it just makes for, you know, an abundance of other storylines now to try to track down. But Max, just what was your first reaction, and how'd you kind of hear, hey, this is actually happening? Colorado looks like they're making a move.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I started hearing from some people back on, I think, probably Sunday night that this was heading in this direction. But to be honest, I've heard it before, right? I mean, it's just there's been a few times where it seemed like the Big 12 was pretty bullish, pretty optimistic on its chances of getting Colorado. Certainly, you know, we've reported pretty consistently for a few months here that, you know, nobody's been more receptive to this than Colorado. Started hearing it Sunday that they were, you know, that they were waiting until after Pac-12 Media Day to move forward with this stuff. And, you know, obviously couldn't get enough confirmation on that, you know, up until yesterday. But, you know, I really did get the sense after the Big 12 meetings, in the end of May when they were in West Virginia and kind of come with their plan. From everyone I talked to coming out of that, there was real optimism about Colorado. And, you know, I think that, there's still a tiny bit of surprise that this is happening, I guess, on my end. But, you know, especially because these schools have been so consistent in saying they're waiting to see, you know, what this Pac-12 TV deal is. And look, there's a lot of ways to break down the winners and losers of this stuff. But, you know, clearly Colorado making this decision with this timing speaks to the real concern about, you know, where these Pac-12 negotiations are right now.
So, Max, do you think that the Pac-12 will be able to hold all the other 9 schools together?
That's the million-dollar question. You know, I think that from everyone I've talked to around the Big 12, really over the past year, I think the theory has always been that if you could get one of them to come over and commit to the Big 12, gives you a chance to get 2 or maybe 4. And I don't know that at this point, I don't think Brett Yormark believes he's getting the 4 corner schools, all 4 of them. I think that would be a surprising development. But, you know, I think the attention really shifts now to Arizona and really to some degree to the rest of the Pac-12, because I think it's pretty clear Brett Yormark wants the Big 12 to be at 14. I think 14 is probably more likely than 16 at this point, unless the Pac-12 totally collapses. So I think the Big 12 wants to take one more, and I think certainly the board would prefer that that's a Pac-12 member. I don't think that's going to happen fast necessarily. Might not happen at all, but I think that's where the focus goes here.
You did have an article come out just a couple of hours ago addressing the UConn side of things. They've been, you know, there's one school that they've completely fallen off the map, and that's Gonzaga. Like, I don't know what happened there, Max, but it's like they just disappeared from discussions. But UConn's been out there, and that was kind of around the time Gonzaga, like, hey, basketball, coast to coast, you know, all that. And then there was, oh, no, that UConn would probably be, you know, a full-on member. And I think it's fair to say there's a bit of a mixed reaction in Big 12 country, maybe to the point of like, yeah, you probably wouldn't get the majority vote, but it seems that this is part of Brett Yormark's vision. And what can you tell us about just UConn, the potential pursuit there, and, you know, how does that fit into this grand old puzzle?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I think it'd be very interesting to see, like, what is the reaction if the Big 12, you know, were to go in that direction. If Colorado is the only Pac-12 school that's coming over, then I could certainly see Brett Yormark going all in on trying to add UConn. And when I say trying to add, I mean trying to convince, you know, Big 12 presidents, chancellors, and ADs that is the move they need to make. I think from everyone I've talked to, the sense I get is that Brett Yormark's really high on UConn and their potential, and really believes that if you bring them into the Big 12, and invest in them. It's not just the immediate impact of men's and women's basketball, but certainly I think he believes that UConn and the Big 12 can become a value add for the conference, and part of that is just he comes from a different background, right? I mean, when he took this job, it's more of an East Coast background. I think it's important to him to plant a flag in New York. Obviously, you saw that a week ago with the event at Rucker Park. Like, I think he sees real, kind of buy low potential in some ways with UConn. It's just a challenge. In every conversation I've had with ADs, you get the sense they're just sort of don't really know if I see that. And so I think that will be an interesting, if it gets to that, if truly UConn is what Brett Yormark views as his best option moving forward to get this thing to 14. I'll be very curious to see, can he sell that and get the votes he needs to get them into the conference, or do you go in a different direction?
I would think, Max, if he did that today, he wouldn't have the votes. But the good news for him and UConn is that it's not like there's a bidding war out there for him.
Yeah, and look, I think one of the challenges there is, if you're adding Pac-12 schools, Big 12 pro rata can get $31 million for those Pac-12 schools. They can't get it for UConn. I really don't think that's the case. Don't think that they'd be able to become a full share member from a revenue standpoint until you do the next TV deal in 2031. So, obviously, there's a little bit of there's some difficulties there, and then they have an exit fee as well from their conference. But look, I think from the UConn side too, even if they can only get, $20 million in TV money as a member of the Big 12 in the near future, that's a lot more than $3.8 million that they're getting from Fox right now. So I certainly can understand the skepticism even on the UConn side of does that really make sense for us? But ultimately money drives a lot of these decisions.
So, Max, apparently there's going to be some meetings tonight, Pac-12 folks getting together. Any number of things are going to have to obviously be on the table, whether it's, expansion or there's still no TV deal. I imagine now you're looking around that room, same room you were around a week ago, and now one of those, people's apparently on their way out after everybody kind of saying everything was okay. So I'm sure there will be a lot of side eyes and just weird things to kind of work through. What do you now anticipate from the Pac and how they react in light of this news?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. If this had broken a couple months ago, then you would think that they would probably move forward with San Diego State, in a heartbeat, and that would be the way they backfill. And then just the way that this all timed up between the TV deal and all this, San Diego State ends up in a really tough spot, has to mend fences with, the Mountain West, and is going to have to pay a ton of money, $34 million or so, if they try to exit the Mountain West now. So there's obviously that complicating factor that has played out pretty publicly here over the past month. I don't know. I mean, I think the idea of going in that direction of, San Diego State, SMU, Colorado State, whatever. I think a week ago, the folks in the Pac-12, there was still some resistance to do any of them make sense for us because, I think especially at the top of that league, if you're Oregon and Washington, you like a pretty clear path to a 12-team playoff and to a top 6 seed and all that stuff. So I think that, or a top 4 seed. So, I think it would be an interesting conversation about how do you replace Colorado? How many do you bring in if you replace Colorado, and can you get everybody within the conference on board with that? And look, I think they all felt like Colorado was locked arms with them on this, waiting till the end of the media rights negotiations. And so naturally there's going to be, more distrust in these meetings than there was yesterday.
So, Max, how do they get caught flat-footed repeatedly? USC, UCLA, out the door. TV deal, nothing. The Alliance, for God's sakes, flat-footed. I mean, how does this keep keep happening to them over and over and over again?
Yeah, I mean, when the dust settles on this stuff, obviously, there's going to be a blame game there to play on the Pac-12 side of things. And how much do you attribute to George Kliavkoff and his predecessor? How much do you attribute to, certainly in some of these cases, you have to point to decision-making or indecision by the Pac-12, board, the CEOs in that league who have turned down some of these opportunities in the past to expand and things like that. So I don't know. I think the crazy thing is we still have a long ways to go. And I think the fact that we're sitting here heading into August, and it's not even just that we don't really know when the Pac-12 deal gets done. I'm sure they'd like to have it done a month from now. We have no clue who the partners are, and we have no clue how close this is going to come to 31 million. We have no clue what the split is on linear versus streaming. Like it's just wild that there's this much uncertainty, and as you guys know from covering the Big 12 this long, when you have this sustained uncertainty, it's going to lead to people that have options exploring their options.
Max, Deion Sanders, how much of an impact did a football head coach seem to have in realignment, in your opinion?
Yeah, it's a great question, and truthfully, like starting with this board meeting coming up, I'm looking forward to hearing the Colorado side of this story, because we haven't really heard that at all up to this point. I mean, they've tried to, their chancellor and their AD Rick George have tried to give pretty measured statements about we're waiting to see what happens and we got to do what's best for Colorado and stuff. I'm really interested to hear sort of how they portray their perspective on why they're making this move now, and why they prefer the Big 12. I think that it's not a secret that Deion Sanders preferred being in the Big 12, felt like he could recruit not just Texas better, but even, the Big 12 is in Florida now. It's more of a national conference now. I think certainly, Colorado wants to recruit at the highest level and feels like this will help. But how much is he in the room on these things? How much is he really like driving the bus on changing leagues? Ultimately, I think it still comes down to a board. But I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how much he wants to take credit for this. I think that, look, the Big 12 was looking at Colorado last summer, long before Deion Sanders showed up, but still, I do know that that's an element of this. Brett Yormark likes big brands, and I think he does view Deion Sanders as a big, exciting brand.
My theory on Deion and his involvement in this, and that most head coaches wouldn't get much of a say other than please give us your input and expertise. But because they've swung so big with Deion, and he is the biggest celebrity you can possibly hire to be the head of your football program, if he asks you for something or says this is what I would prefer, it probably carries a little bit more weight than most.
I think Deion Sanders, of all the first-year head coaches this year, and really probably over the last few years here in college football, I don't think anyone has accumulated more power in a short period of time at a school than Deion Sanders has in showing up at Colorado. Honestly, they are doing everything the Coach Prime way, from top to bottom there at Colorado. And so I'm not saying that's why they're changing conferences by any means, but certainly, his arrival and the relevance that is instantly created for Colorado from a national standpoint, that hire has paid dividends already, no matter what the record is this fall. And he's got more say than these other guys do. I mean, you remember a year ago, like, you had to question, like, wait, did Lincoln Riley know that USC was going into the Big Ten? Right? Like, usually the head coach is really not a party to this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Max, about 15 minutes from now, we'll hear the results of the vote, and we all wait with bated breath to hear if somehow the Pac-12 pulled out this dark horse win. So,
yeah, guys, turned out this wasn't fake news, huh?
Yeah, imagine that. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Max Olson, The Athletic.
Hey, man, good
Max,
job.
thanks a lot. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys.
All right, yeah. So, yeah.